all except for Omer had an opportunity yesterday to cross the border. And that's what I was thinking in today's both readings, crossing the border. When Solomon was old, his wives turned toward his heart to strange gods. And I told you 2 days ago when I was preaching about Solomon, he was looking pretty good 2 days ago about how wise he was and offering prayer. And I said it goes pretty much downhill from there with his wine, women, and weapons of war. Wisdom, he topples down. And we crossed over, remember we crossed over the Jordan yesterday and thought that was a little difficult. But what did we leave behind? Well, the first city we went to was Ammon. And what do they hear? By adoring Astarte, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the idol of the Ammonites. So we left that behind when we crossed the Jordan symbolically. And then it talks about Solomon then built a high place to Shamash. And Steve Ray mentioned that. When we were in Nebo, we were on top. That was where? Tells us. In Moab. So we left that behind. Or did we? So we see Catholics leaving the church in droves, and many women turning the hearts of men away from the tradition, as it mentions here, that referring to Solomon. He did not follow him unreservedly as his father David had done. He left behind his tradition. So easily do Catholics leave behind this rich tradition, this Judeo-Christian tradition, and enter into a strange land. Will you also leave, Peter? To whom shall we go, Lord? You have the words of everlasting life. And so we also see that when you have marriages or lack thereof, when people do not have the full commitment, they don't even understand the meaning of marriage, they don't understand the meaning of the two becoming one flesh, they don't even understand who they are, they begin to worship idols, their own selves, believing that they can create themselves, that there is no God, but they themselves create their own sexual identity. And it's no wonder that they do not understand the meaning of human sexuality or what life is called to do, the two-in-one flesh relationship that is made manifest in the intimate embrace of husband and wife. They lose all trace of that kind of thought when we put up walls with contraception, and we also put up walls when we abort and do not allow the number one kind of immigration that we should be concerned about, the child in the womb. And we're worried about building up walls. We're doing that all the time in individual homes. And so the God of pleasure, sexual pleasure, the God of choice, no matter what, not choice to do what one ought, but choice to do whatever one chooses to do. Because if you're a god or a goddess, you're in charge. You're in charge. You make it up as you go along. And what is the punishment for that? Well, God tells Solomon, since this is what you want, and you have not kept my covenant, my statutes, which I enjoin you, I will deprive you of the kingdom and give it to your servant. And he's going to take away that kingdom. And to me, we're in the stage in the Catholic Church where it's like, yeah, the king, we're willing to throw him under the bus. We don't care about Jesus. It's about our pleasure right now. It's about what we want for ourselves right now. And we'll abandon the faith, if we ever had any, and we'll seek other gods, we'll seek other wives, we'll seek other spouses. But you know, there's hope. I will leave your son one tribe for the sake of my servant David and of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. For the sake of the Son of David, Jesus Christ. For the sake of mixed signals being sent from upper echelons, we have to truly recognize that Jesus Christ gave us the promise, his reason to hope, and his love poured out for us. And this is not a time to doubt, but a time for the Bible. A time to be strong, to fight for what is right. Most priests would say that's enough. I'm going to go to the gospel today. And the gospel today is very powerful for me. I took some time last night to look at it. This is not a doctrinal, it's more of a, as they said in the seminary, maybe an eisegesis, rather than somebody taking it out and trying to apply it. Jesus went to the district of Tyre, crossing the border. You have to ask yourself when you look at that, why is he going to the district of Tyre? That's outside, especially in light of the fact that what he's about to say to this woman who's not Jewish. She's Greek, and she's born Greek, she's Syro-Phoenician, and he goes into foreign territory. That's one thing we should ask right away, why? And what does it say? He entered a house and wanted no one to know about it. Have you ever thought, what house? Who invited him? Did he sneak in? Did someone outside of Galilee, outside of Judaism, invite him? And he didn't want anybody to know about it. Why? So what's he doing in Tyre? What's he doing in that house? Why didn't he want anybody to know about it? You got to ask those questions. I'm setting you up for the wedding feast of Cana. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 15, the same encounter with this woman is mentioned. Ooh, you better rephrase that. The same encounter is mentioned, and lost my train of thought on that one.
Cana.
It's a little, well, it's the Canaanite woman, but it's a little prolonged, and he's talks to her, and the disciples in Matthew's Gospel, this is Mark, say something we're not finding in Mark, which is, send her away, send her away. She's yelling after us. The Lord in Mark's Gospel has already talked to them twice in the boat when they were fearful. Thought he was a ghost. He calmed the waves another time. He's going to multiply the loaves twice in Mark's Gospel. It says that the Pharisees are tempting him, looking for signs, asking why they're eating certain things, why he's healing people in synagogues. The disciples, it says, they did not recognize what he was doing when he broke bread, multiplied the loaves. They didn't recognize that. And it said, because their hearts were hardened. So nobody gets it except for the poor and this woman. The Jewish tradition, at this particular time, we're seeing that Jesus is indeed going to save the primacy of the Jewish tradition. And yet, what happens? Wedding feast of Cana, Mary, getting back to that. Mary, with that encounter, what happens? Mary comes to Jesus, and she represents faithful Judaism, virgin daughter Zion. What the hunger and thirst for the Messiah has been down through the centuries. They have no more wine. You have to ask, first of all, Cana, what are they doing at a wedding? The most famous wedding ever to take place, and we have no idea who got married. How crazy is that? So John, in that, wants us to know, yeah, think about that. This is, yes, they were at a wedding, but we don't really care what that wedding was except for Jesus, the groom, and his bride, the church. And Mary is saying, they've sucked it dry. Judaism, we've run awry. And Jesus Christ is the new wine. He's going to fill up the church. But she, Mary, with her faith. But there's an encounter. And he says, woman, what is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come. In other words, I'm not ready to start performing my signs because that's going to lead to, they want to kill me, put me to death. And it's not time yet. And yet you think when you first read that, then that's going to be it. She's going to say, so sorry, no more wine. And yet no, do whatever he tells you. I see this as a parallel. Mary enables the word to go out and sink it deep in the people's hearts so that people might be saved, so that the entire Old Testament might be fulfilled. Jesus crossed the border. though he was in the form of God, he did not deem equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself and took the form of a slave. And the Word became flesh and dwelt in our midst. That's the biggest crossing of the border that ever took place. He crossed into humanity. The eternal Son of God became Son of Mary. And because of her yes, and her persistent yes, and her pointing to her Creator and God's Son, and God's Word, and her Son, do whatever he tells you. She welcomes the Word, as that responsorial psalm said. She welcomes the Word so that we might gain this inheritance, this everlasting inheritance. And then the encounter, this woman, he said to her, let the children be fed first. Well, Jesus, if that's your problem, what are you doing in Tyre to begin with? Why'd you go over there if you don't want to have that encounter? People asking you, stay over in Galilee. He's not doing this because he's forgetful of where the border crossing is. He's deliberately doing the same thing when he goes to that wedding that we don't even know who got married, to show us down through the ages. Yes, there's a primacy in God's plan. First to the Jews, but the good news is it's for us as well. And so she, this woman, like Mary, says, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's scraps. Here it says, for saying this, you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter. But in Matthew's gospel, he says, because of your great faith. Because of your faith. Because of your faith, this is done. Mary's faith, part that fulfills Judaism, when she says, let it be done unto me according to thy word. And here, what's happening to the Gentiles. And in Mark's gospel, you've got Jesus feeding for the Jewish crowd, and the second one feeding for the Gentile crowd. All of this wrapped up together in the Eucharistic Lord, the God-man, who comes to us to build up as groom, his body, his bride, the church. Couldn't help but think that we were just the other day, and almost to end this thing as far as I know, when we were at the fortress of Herod. And I thought about this, Herod and his wife. Does anybody remember his wife's name? Herodias. What a name. Herodias, Odious Herodias. And what did she do? I said, where did you get a name like that? Well, she already married Herod's brother. So she took his last name, so she can't take Herod's last name because you got to make a distinction between that because you already married his brother. So she takes his first name and adds his to it. I don't know. That's what I could come up with. When the woman went home, she found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. Amir mentioned in the bus, and nobody got it right. I certainly did. I said Constantine. He said, no, not Constantine. Don't feel bad. He was talking to me. His mother. His mother. Well, Herodias asked her daughter to petition Herod for the head of John the Baptist. What do we have today? This woman beseeching Jesus on behalf of her daughter. The daughter's kind of away. He said, what daughter is this? It's not central. It's not central, the daughter being healed. What's central is Jesus is moving out. And the big thing is, why would Jesus talk about the dogs and all that? And Stephen was saying about half an hour ago about the colorful language that Jesus uses. This is pretty colorful, calling this woman one of the dogs. And yet that's what they call the Gentiles. But I think what Jesus is doing is taking that language that they can relate to and understand, and he's showing the apostles who are saying, send her away. And the multiplication of loaves are saying, no, this is where I've been multiplying these loaves. We got plenty left over, 12 baskets full. I fed the 5,000, fed 4,000, 7 baskets full, 12 standing for the 12 tribes of Israel, 7 for the Gentile nations. And it's like, hey, this is not a zero-sum game. She realized it. Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's scraps. In other words, Jesus is saying, guys, did you not see? I just multiply the loaves. We got plenty. There's plenty to go around. We can feed her as well as the Jews. That's especially good news.